starting to have trouble. But our chief investment officer never once said sell equities or reduce equities or look out below or anything. It was just stay the status quo, stay the status quo. So I started moving some of my clients' money to cash. Now I'm not going to sit here and say that I called the real estate crash. I didn't. I did keep my wife from buying a house, which in hindsight maybe that wasn't a good idea. But in 2008, we were glad that we did not do it. But I could see kind of what was happening, and a lot of what was happening was what was written about in The Creature from Jekyll Island and Bill Bonner's book. And that's about the time I started reading Austrian economics, going to the Mises.org website. And so when 2008 started to play out, I kind of felt like I had a peek behind the curtain a little bit, if that's the right way to say it. I kind of understood what was happening, whereas everybody else in my firm was just, I felt, blinded. And part of the blindness is due to in my opinion, the reward systems on Wall Street. And the people that work at Credit Suisse and at Goldman Sachs and at Morgan Stanley, I don't think they're bad people. Now some of them are, but most of them are good, hardworking people. It's just that the incentives are all wrong. And if you work in those organizations and you want to advance your career and move up the ladder and do better, you have to do certain things. And if your chief investment officer is telling you those things are the right things to do, it's very easy to do those. Because if you do them, you make a lot of money. But what happens is every now and then you get a 2000 dot-com crash, or you get a 1998 hedge fund crisis, or you get a 2008 real estate crisis, or in the next couple of years you get a currency crisis, and all that stuff that the chief investment officer says goes out the window. And so it wasn't very long, so 2008, so I had started moving some clients to cash, and that helped a little bit, but we still lost money. And I hate losing money for clients. It's awful. For anybody who's ever been in the business, or whenever anybody is asking my advice about getting into the business, I've always said, if you can't look somebody in the eye and tell them they just lost $1 million, it's the wrong business for you. And I've had to do that, unfortunately, and it's not fun. And after 2008, I swore it was never going to happen again. So I was going to do whatever I could do to get out of that system where I had to do things I didn't want to do in order to be rewarded. So 2008 came and passed. I went back to my bosses and I said, okay, so what did we learn? Or, what are we going to do different? And the essential answer was, well, thank God it's passed. We made it through it. It's back to business as usual. I thought, gee, many Christmas, really? We didn't learn anything? So I started looking around different firms to go to. And again, in our business, the way it kind of works is you build up a business with one firm, and when you want to go to another firm, that other firm will pay you a lot of money to go to that other firm and bring your clients with you. So I started interviewing with these other firms, and a lot of money was put on the table, and it was very tempting, and I just about took it. But essentially, I realized I would just be doing the exact same thing for the exact same type of firm. The only thing that would change would be my business card. Because all the firms are the same. I don't care what anybody tells you. They're all, 99% of them are all the same. Now, the individual employee or the individual advisor can make a little bit difference here and there. And maybe one company will take Google public and another one will take eBay public, or whatever it is. But for the most part, they have the same platforms. And I know because I looked at all of them. And I worked in that space for 10 to 12 years. And that's why when an advisor moves from one firm to the other, it's typically a fairly seamless transition because they're doing the exact same thing. Again, the only thing that changes is the business card. So, in my early days at Credit Suisse, I had worked with a guy named Simon Baker, and Simon had never really bought into the whole asset allocation buy and hold approach. And essentially, that's what all the big firms say. All the big firms say, set an asset allocation, buy some bonds, buy some stocks, get some hedge funds, have some exposure to real estate, and one of them might say buy 1% in gold, and hold on to it. And over time, those assets will appreciate and the diversification will protect you. That's essentially the line. So Simon had always believed in diversification, but he never believed in the buy and hold. And we had managed money using a combination of, without going into too much detail, I can go into more detail later if you guys want to, but a combination of technical indicators and fundamental indicators. And that would help us move out of the market when we saw downturns coming. And in 1998, there was a hedge fund crisis. In 2000, there was the dot-com crisis. 2007 was the credit crisis, or 2008 was the credit crisis. 2011 was the debt downgrade crisis in August. And before every one of those events happened, Simon had been in cash, or had moved to cash. Now, whether it was luck or whether it was skill, that's up for anybody else to decide. But when you get 5 out of 5 right, I think there's at least a little bit of skill involved there. And so he'd been a very good friend of mine for a long time, and I was telling him kind of the struggles I was having walking through the doors at Credit Suisse. And I was thinking about going to other firms, but I just ended up right where I was. And he said, well, why don't you just come work with me? And for whatever reason, I had never really thought of that. And the more we talked about it, the more it made sense. So I passed up the big check, and I went to work with Simon because I figured in the long term, if you do the right thing, you'll make money down the road. So I was doing the long-term greedy rather than short-term greedy philosophy, so to speak. So if you look in your packet here, I'm not going to go through these page by page. There's a one-page laminated sheet in here.
Is that somebody can look at it in the kitchen and get it dirty?
Yeah, exactly. But essentially what it is, we believe in diversification at Baker Avenue. We think you should have some exposure to cash and bonds and stocks, commodities, precious metals. And I think that's what all the firms will tell you. But what they won't tell you is sometimes you can move to cash. You can sell all your stocks and sit in cash for a while. You can reduce your bond exposure. You can sell some of your gold from time to time if you want to. But the idea is to maintain a core asset allocation and try to optimize around it, but not just be static buy and hold. And if you look at the green line here compared to the blue line here, since 2005 and through the end of the year, that's kind of Baker Avenue versus the S&P 500. Now, we're not perfect. We lose money from time to time, and there's sometimes we trail the index. But in our opinion, that's okay, because a lot of people use the S&P 500 as their benchmark when it's the completely wrong benchmark to use. We don't think everybody's benchmark should be the S&P 500. But in any case, we think preserving capital is just as important as making capital. So that was 2010. And so for the back in 2008, I remember buying gold for clients in the fall of 2008 for $700, I think it was $85 was about the lowest I bought it. I think it went a little bit lower than that at one point. And the more and more I read about Austrian economics, and the more I read about the national debt and the monetary system itself, the more and more I got interested in precious metals. And whereas previously I'd always bought an ETF of GLD or a mutual fund or whatever it was, the more I started to realize that in a disaster, those things they might not provide the safety that you're looking for. And so I started looking for a fund out there that would do what I wanted to do, which was basically store metal outside the United States, store it outside the banking system, have the ability to, in a banking crisis, get the gold if we needed to, but also wanted to have exposure to precious metals mining stocks, and also wanted to have the ability to hedge it from time to time. That fund does not exist, at least not the one that I could find. So what I did is I decided to build it myself.
Thank you.
And that's where the Santiago Capital comes in. So whereas Baker Avenue believes in precious metals and believing in having it as an allocation, they haven't necessarily jumped all the way down the rabbit hole as far as I have. So whereas they actually think having a mutual fund or an ETF is probably okay, I just don't. I didn't feel comfortable doing that for my own money, and I wasn't going to do that for client money if I wasn't going to do it with my money. So I started Santiago Capital. So there's a one-page in here as well. There's a one-page sheet that looks like this. And this is the Santiago Gold Fund. It's a one-page patch. Basically, the Santiago Gold Fund, and I'm not going to go through it completely right now, but the strategy is that we're always going to have at least 50% of the fund in physical gold bullion stored outside the United States, outside the banking system. So right now we've got 2 vaults in Switzerland and 1 in Singapore. The other 50% of the fund, it can be allocated to gold, it could be allocated to cash, it could be allocated to silver, it could be allocated to a combination of all the above. We also use it to buy put protection or short gold from time to time in order to hedge big downward moves, which we've seen in the last couple of weeks. So we believe that that's a superior structure to just buying an ETF or a mutual fund. And it's through really the combination of all that above and my study of the monetary system that I came up with this presentation, the implications of a flawed monetary system. Now over the last year, I've probably sent out 10 of these types of presentations. And I tried to combine them all into kind of one. I'm not going to be able to go through everything with you guys. But if at any point you guys want to stop me or dig into something in more detail, feel free to do so. And if at the end of the lunch here, if you guys want me to send you more information, if we could get is there a way to get everybody's email or something?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. You know, you can get my email, shoot me an email, I'm happy to send it to whoever wants. But I'll just kind of, so also in the packet there's kind of a bigger presentation. There's a bunch
So
of
do we have all of your slides in here?
Yeah,
In this thing?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So I'll just kind of walk through it here. So I call it the implications of a flawed monetary system. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but this is basically, is there any engineers in the room? So I'm not an engineer, so I probably won't describe this the exact right way. But from a design perspective, the monetary system, if you think of the monetary system as a system and the way it is designed, there is a flaw in the system. So this is an exponential curve. And, you know, for lack of a better definition, an exponential curve is if you take a number, any number, and you increase that number by even 1% every year, eventually that curve is going to turn up and it's going to go straight up. And it's going to go up at a faster and faster rate. So that's what this is right here. Now, this is a curve of a system in the world that very much looks like that first exponential curve. And since 1920, it started at 6.8 billion, and today it's at about 12.5 trillion. So that's compounded at an average rate of about 7% for the last 93 years. And here's the thing, is when you get an exponential curve, it has to continue going up. And it goes up at an increasing rate. If it doesn't continue going up, then it crashes. And it crashes spectacularly. And that's what you can see on this graph here.
Well, what is this the graph up?
Good question. This is the graph of the U.S. monetary system. This is the U.S. Money supply.
Into?
This is actually the monetary
MCA
base.
or-
This is the monetary base. So the monetary base is, well here, on this page you can see the increases over the last 93 years. There's only been 8 years in the last 93 years where it has decreased. And the last significant decrease was over 50 years ago, and that was 2.3% in 1949.
Of the actual money supply?
Yeah, the monetary base.
Monetary base.
This is the monetary. So there's a lot of different ways to measure the money supply. You know, there's currency, there's reserves at the Fed, there's M1, M2, and for lack of let me just get to that second. So the point I want to get to here is, well, why does it have to keep growing? Why does it have to keep growing? And if it doesn't keep growing, why will it crash? And this is where we get into the design itself. The design of the monetary system is a fiat debt-based monetary system. If you're not familiar with the word fiat, that's because it's money because the government says it's money, not because the free market has chosen it as money. It's loaned into existence, and it's an unlimited supply of it, because all you have to do is print more of it if you want more money. I'm guessing if, we got a lot of libertarians here, this is not a foreign concept. You've probably heard at least some form of this before. Does anybody recognize this guy right here? Any chance? Probably not. His name's Rube Goldberg.
Is that what he looks like?
So you guys are familiar with Rube Goldberg?
Yeah.
Okay. So Rube Goldberg was very famous, I think, back in like the early 1900s. He was kind of a satirist. He would write these cartoons that would show these incredibly complex systems that would do very simple things. So as an example, this is a picture of a way to take a picture of yourself with about 18 different steps in it. When really all you could just hold up the camera and just push the button. But he made it needlessly complicated. And my point is that our fiat monetary system is needlessly complicated. We have central planners who try to affect the inputs or the many different characteristics in the monetary system, such as inflation, the velocity of money, GDP growth, they set the discount rate and the Fed funds rate,
Who gets the money?
who gets the money, how quickly they get it, who gets it first. So, and it's just needlessly complicated. And a lot of these things that they're trying to fix, in my opinion, they're the symptoms of the problem. They're not the problem itself. So if you're, if you're drinking poison every day and you start to feel bad, and the doctor gives you medicine to make your stomach feel better, well, he's not really addressing the problem is that you're drinking poison every day. So they're trying to fix the symptoms of the problem.
And I would like to add that a lot of guys pulling these levers are really using effectively a Keynesian worldview, which
Sure.
is, aggregates things beyond
Right.
recognition, right?
Absolutely.
And
So now-
that's really what they're educated in
Sure.
all the leading.
Exactly. Well, and there's a reason to. I mean, there's, I'm not going to sit here and say that the creature from Jekyll Island is exactly correct, but there's a lot of truth in it. If you pull the levers and you get to, at the end of the day, they're skimming a very, very small fraction off of an extremely large base. And it's the way they make billions and billions of dollars. But one of the most important things in the monetary system itself is the flow of the funds. I have this picture in here. There was a guy named Michael Welling that wrote an article, Michael Lewitt that wrote an article on Welling on Wall Street. It's a research piece. Talk about the necessary of the flow, and he compared it to a shark. And like a shark has to keep swimming or else it dies. It's the same thing with the monetary system. If the money stops circulating, the monetary system dies. So the flow is probably the most important piece of the monetary system.